Good afternoon and welcome back to the public hearing and public meeting of the Landmarks Preservation Commission today, January 10th, 2023. We are resuming this session with public meeting item number 2. We then will go back to our public hearing agenda to do the remaining items on that agenda and then return to the public meeting agenda to do public meeting item number 1 and 3. So with that, I will turn it over to our Director of Preservation, Corey Harala, to take us through our agendas this afternoon.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. And as stated, we'll start with public meeting item number 2, LPC 23-02975, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 448, Lot 5, 112 2nd Avenue in the East Village, Lower East Side Historic District. This is a Gothic Revival-style church building designed by Samuel Burridge Reed and built in 1891 to 92, and the application is to demolish the remaining facade and foundation after the building experienced a fire. This was last presented at the public meeting of December 13th, 2022, and no action was taken at that time. The applicants will begin their presentation after we open the proceedings.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just do that now so that that is all seamless. So commissioners, if you can all unmute or accept my request to unmute. All right, and Commissioner Gustafson, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Shamir Barron, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the applicants may speak.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Ken Fisher, counsel for Middle Collegiate Church. Thank you for once again giving us the opportunity to speak with you today. I know you have a long agenda. I'll try and be brief. I wanted to mention for the record that since our last session, I believe the Commission received a letter from Borough President Mark Levine in full support of the application. I know that we had also received a letter from Councilmember Carlina Rivera. I don't remember whether that was mentioned on the record or not. The reason that we wanted to speak with you today was just to very briefly comment on the final report from your consulting engineer. And I'm going to paraphrase a letter that was sent on January 6th from Anthony Johnson, the project architect. We noted that the engineer had concluded that any overhead risk would need to be remediated and eliminated before any groundwork and a larger repair could occur. And this is consistent with our professional team's opinion. As we've previously documented, separate from the safety concerns, which themselves warrant complete demolition, significant outward-facing elements have been destroyed or visibly severely damaged. The entire church building for which they were designed no longer exists, and there's additional material required to be removed for code compliance. These have already compromised the architectural integrity of the structure. If you then take into account the engineer's conclusion that there is no doubt that much of the facade brick has been significantly damaged and the remediation would still require an excessive amount of the brick to be removed. That's assuming it be accomplished at all, which he had previously noted would require chopping through even the intact limestone facing. What could remain under even the best of circumstances would not bear any substantial relationship to what existed at the time of the designation. That's why our application is appropriate under these unfortunate circumstances and would allow the church to proceed with a new church building. Lastly, I just wanted to mention that in the context of what the application actually has called for, the application is for the remnants to be completely demolished because what would be left after demolition to eliminate the safety risks and removal of the additional material, as I said before, has no architectural relationship to the original building design. However, I did want to make a note that it's the church's intention to reuse in the new design some of the original materials to the extent practical and appropriate. We don't really know what form that's going to take or volume, nor do we know exactly how the design process is going to conclude. But I did want to mention that for the record, and we'd be happy to answer questions or comments if the commissioners have any. Thank you.
Are you
Sarah?
turning it? Yeah, okay, I wasn't sure if we were turning it over to another team member at all. Okay. All right, so I guess following up on the prior two presentations and the comments we've heard today, I just want to turn to the commissioners and see if you have any questions. Yes, Commissioner Devonshire.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I heard the words intent, some, and to the extent practical, which can be completely meaningless terms unless there's some sort of requirement for this to take place. Are we, as the commission, in a position to require, if we're allowing the demolition of this landmark, are we in a position to require that a certain number or a certain amount or a certain element or system be used in the new building?
I think that and Mark, you can maybe answer this better than me, but I think that we have in other cases, like this morning, for example, where the applicant wanted to reconstruct the facade, we did require that they reuse existing bricks to the extent feasible or practical, right? So if the material is salvageable, we have required reusing it, incorporating it, exploring ways to incorporate it. But that is based on further assessment on how intact and salvageable that material is.
So we can
subject
require.
to, yeah, subject to the continued assessment of it.
Great, thank you.
Chair Carroll, could I just
Yep.
briefly comment also? We're asking the commission to allow the church to have the maximum flexibility at the minimum cost. They are resource constrained. They've spent $4 million to make safe a structure that now needs to be demolished. And I think that throughout this proceeding and all of the testimony that you've heard, that they're entitled to some benefit of the doubt when it comes to their good faith. I would also point out that in many of the cases that I'm familiar with where you've made that a requirement, it's been some type of voluntary project or something that was done by an owner that prompted the application being before you. Here, we're the victim of circumstances, and I may be wrong about this, but to the best of my knowledge and the recollection of the engineer on that project, there was no such requirement for 64 Norfolk Street when the commission authorized the demolition of the synagogue after that tragic fire.
So I think at 60 Norfolk, the applicants did ultimately propose keeping a low wall portion that would amount to a low wall. And we approved that, but again, they proposed that. I guess another example might be the rectory at 1010 Park Avenue, which was an altered building, well, really a replaced building with some remnants of an earlier rectory. It was a 1963 building that was identified as non-contributing. So it is a little bit different in all respects, and there was no fire, but the proposal was to demolish the 1963 building that replaced the earlier rectory and to construct a new apartment building. And in that case, we required that they use some of the schist in the new design of the new base of the building. So it was incorporated in a completely new design. And that was a requirement that came through that came out of the process and ultimately, was incorporated into the proposal prior to the approval.
Yeah. So, Commissioner, I think that that's an interesting example, which is distinguished from our case in many respects. One is it was a developer of very high-end residential properties in a super high-value neighborhood that was undertaking and asking for something beyond
That's right.
otherwise be able to do. So I think the circumstances are somewhat different. I also want to mention that I went back. I had the pleasure of reading the designation report for this historic district, and I know that a number of the commissioners, including Commissioner Devonshire, if I recall correctly, were members of the commission then and voted for it. And I'm not an architect, as you're well aware, but it did strike me as it's going to be a very interesting exercise in using some of the limestone when the overwhelming number of buildings in the district are brick facade tenements. In fact, I sort of did a search for the word limestone. I found a couple that had limestone in the bases, but certainly not the predominant building material of the district. Now, I know that there are other churches in the area that do have it. So what I'm saying is whatever your legal authority would be, I believe that the church has done everything it can, has acted in good faith, has demonstrated that, and we would please ask you to not impose more costs than we need or to tie our hands more than may be appropriate.
Okay, and I, do hear you, and I think we all recognize that this is not a proposal where a developer is coming in asking for something, and the result of that is to incorporate some fabric. We understand that this is a very tragic situation, and that the church has been invested in this community and invested in this site. And we all, I think, want to find the best solution that serves the church as well as the neighborhood.
By the
All
way,
right.
I neglected to mention that we do have available Reverend Lewis and our engineer if it's appropriate. I think when we conclude this section, maybe Reverend Lewis will make a couple of comments at the end, but otherwise we're happy to answer any other questions.
Okay, thank you. Are there other questions? All right, I don't see any other questions. I will note, as you have, that we did receive a letter in support from Manhattan Borough President Mark Levine recommending approval, and we also received another letter recommending approval from an individual since the last public meeting. And as you noted, Councilmember Rivera also sent a letter in support of the church, which I think we did note at the last public meeting. So if there are no other questions, I think what I would like to do is ask Mark to address some of the access issues, since that was a topic that came up at the last public meeting, and there were questions about what could be required.
I'd be happy to, Sarah. The applicant has noted that it has been unsuccessful in negotiating access from the adjacent neighbor, and also noted that obtaining access requires going to court. I have reviewed the relevant RPL section, which is section 881, and it does grant, I know it does grant a court the discretion to mandate access and a license to do repairs and construction. I think there are novel questions about the scope of the request in this case, since it would be hard to estimate how long access would be required given the various stages of work, inspection, remediation, repair, and in the end, perhaps new construction. The cases that I saw had to do with specific known repair or safety work, where access was really for a very discrete period of time. Also, access didn't radically disrupt the use of the adjacent site. That's not the case here. There is the issue of first inspecting and testing the rear facade, the issue of designing and doing the work necessary to do that, make the site safe, and then doing the work itself. The scope of this is uncertain, and therefore the outcome in court is far from certain. Thus, requiring the applicant to go to court, perhaps multiple times, could be imposing a significant, unclear, and uncertain burden on the applicant. thus, I think the commission can, for purposes of this particular application, take the view that access is presumed to be limited from Second Avenue. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any about that.
Thank you, Mark. All right. Do we have any questions for Mark?
And Sarah, if I
Yeah.
could just note for the record again, commissioners have all been given a copy of Eric Madsen's report. We retained Eric to advise us and have him review the applicant's engineering and other submissions. And Eric's report, did conclude that if access is limited really to Second Avenue, that the issues of safety were such that he did concur that keeping the facades up would be infeasible, and that in essence would have to take them down and make them safe, as the applicant has argued would be required. And Eric is also here if anyone has any questions for Eric.
Okay. So I will ask commissioners before we go into our discussion, if there are any questions for our engineer, Eric Madsen, please raise your hand or let me know. Okay, not seeing any questions. I think we can move to our discussion. And as we've said, this application is very unusual. And we've heard now, and I think you're all aware, the church is asking that given the extensive fire damage and the safety and access issues, which require the deconstruction of major portions of the north and south towers and the gable, that the commission find the remaining historic fabric lacks integrity and that it is appropriate to remove the remaining portions of the facade. And the church has stated its intention to build a new church on the site, and any proposal for a new building would be subject to the commission's review and approval. And as we've heard, the majority of the building was destroyed by the 6-alarm fire that started on the adjacent property. And what remains is the primary Second Avenue facade and portions of the undesigned south party wall. And the church chose to try and save the primary facade at the time of the fire and spent significant funds and time to stabilize the front facade and apply a protective coating to the exposed interior walls. And we've also heard that the primary facade is globally stable, but that portions of the limestone facade are significantly damaged and the interior brick walls of the facade are heavily damaged. And finally, we've heard that the church has been unable to negotiate with the neighboring property where the fire started to get access to the site from the side street, and therefore the only access to the site is from Second Avenue. The argument before us, presented to us, is that the access issues make it infeasible to inspect, test, and remediate the back of the primary facade, and limited testing and remediation of the front as well, due to the overhead safety issues caused by the compromised facade. They've also argued that to make the site safe for any inspection, testing, or remediation would first require taking down significant portions of the north and south towers and the gable to a safe height. And because of this, and taking into account the loss of original fabric from the fire, they have argued that the remaining remnants no longer have sufficient integrity to require that the front facade be retained or rebuilt. And as Mark has stated, our engineer has continued to review the materials and has concluded in his recent report, which has been shared with you, that the access issues make it infeasible to retain the facade as is. So the questions before you are whether you believe the applicant has made its case that the remaining facade must be significantly deconstructed due to access and safety issues, and if you do you agree that what remains of the historic church building lacks integrity and therefore is appropriate to take down those remaining portions of the facade? In other words, it comes down to the philosophical question of what remains. And, again, this is unusual because what remains are remnants of the primary facade and south party wall. And after deconstruction, what would remain would be even less fabric, sort of a fragment of a fragment. it's not like a row house with structural issues where we require reconstruction. There is no roof, no other walls or building there. And so the question is, would requiring those remnants, those fragments, have meaning, requiring retention of those fragments have meaning to the character of the historic district? And also understanding that even in an exacting reconstruction, if it were possible, the vast majority of the building would be new. So is it necessary to retain any part of the building or historic fabric to recall that building? And so I think this will be an interesting discussion. As we've alluded to, the only other case in recent memory that raises a similar issue is that at 60 Norfolk Street, which was an individual landmark on the Lower East Side. And that case was similar in that the building had suffered a major fire and the roof and the entire interior were lost. In that case, however, there was access from the street, the side, and the rear of the property. And the commission required hand demolition to a safe level. And during the course of that work, as we know, and despite concerns and warnings about worker safety from the owners, teams and engineers, there was a collapse and a worker died. So after that, the commission approved the demolition of the remaining fabric. And in that case, the applicant did propose and the commission approved the retention of a low portion of the exterior wall, which could be incorporated into the new design. So I think that is the closest comparison. And with all of the facts that have been laid out, we'll begin our discussion about the dismantling and then, the question, sort of philosophical question about the integrity of the remaining portions of the facade. So, yes, Mark.
But I've been reminded that the applicant, Reverend Jackie, had asked to speak, and
Okay.
we went ahead without giving her that opportunity.
Okay, sorry, I didn't. I thought I had asked if anyone else wanted to speak. Please, Reverend, go ahead and we'd be happy to hear from you.
Thank you, Sarah. When you came by before, I just couldn't unmute myself. I was trying
Oh, okay.
yeah, I'm on a handheld. So hello, everyone. It's good to see you and Happy New Year. I just wanted to thank you once again for making time for us. Our rebuild has been time consuming for all of you as well. So we're grateful for your attention to this. And I wanted to say, just acknowledge that we have been on an emotional roller coaster, right? With the whole globe, we all, suffered from COVID, from deaths and sickness and isolation. We pivoted to get ourselves into a digital space to keep each other safe. And then the fire, this catastrophic fire, knocked us back on our heels. And just to be as candid as I can, the standing facade was like a sign of hope and resilience. We're like, woohoo, the facade is here. So let's work it out. And so to invest in the facade and to have it be now a barrier to rebuilding is honestly devastating. I wanted to make sure you understood that our people's hearts are broken. What's been our North Star in all of this is our communities, plural, our neighbors in the East Village who've been like, we can't wait to have you back, how can we help? The support from our electeds and the folks who govern us. Our national neighbors who write to us and make donations and say, when are you getting back to the East Village? Because for them, we are their cathedral, if you will, in the East Village of New York. So we have every intention of discovering what we discover as we demolish the facade and retaining what we can and incorporating what we can. And we just don't know. You don't know and we don't know what that will look like. So we're anxious, we're excited to get a yes from you so we can collaborate and make something beautiful that gives Middle and our community a home for centuries to come. So thank you for letting me get that off my chest.
Great. Thank you very much. And thank you for all of your, collaboration and cooperation during this process. I know it's been very hard for you and for all the members of the church. And we do recognizes is important to the community. And I think we are taking this very seriously and really trying to understand what is feasible and what is appropriate here. So thank you for your patience as we've worked very carefully on this.
Thank you
Okay.
all.
So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Devonshire, would you like to start this one?
Sure, Sarah, thank you. I fear that I may end up being the preservation goat on this one, but my conscience tells me that I have to do that. I had the distinct pleasure of joining a colleague of mine in Paris over the Thanksgiving break, who is working on the restoration of Notre Dame Cathedral. And when I, of course, thought of the church here, and I thought of the issues of worker safety and all of the other issues that took place after that one. I mean, of course, this is not Notre Dame, but I said, you know, what did you do to get to the inside of the church so that you could assess the damage without worrying about people having their heads knocked off? And she said, we had cranes. And it was kind of an aha moment for me, because I know there's been discussion about cherry pickers and everything else having to do with this particular building. But in fact, it's very easy for me to envision the use of a crane to get a material in and out over that front wall without causing any sort of seismic damage, getting material behind it, and at some point having an assessment done, an existing condition assessment done of what remains of this building. And I realize it was a very unfortunate situation, but when I look at things, for example, the image in the center here requiring pretty much a third of the building to be removed in order to get equipment into it, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense when I think of what they were able to do at Notre Dame, which is remove nothing and get hundreds of men in there to do removal work and do remediation work. And so it's very difficult for me without given the level of investigation that's been done to provide access and safety. I don't think it's been adequate enough for me to be able to say, yeah, let's just go in and knock this thing down. And with regard to I mean, the other thing that I think about is traveling around Europe and seeing so many partial facades, partial buildings in the landscape that tell the story, that tell the history of some of these countries. I mean, look at Scotland, for example. I mean, all of these evocative buildings. And so for me, there is enough evocative material left on this building that I believe if there was a careful investigation, that this facade could be saved. And so I'm not in a position to approve this at this point.
Sorry, I'm muted. And Michael, you're looking at the third photograph as you're making those comments, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I'm just going to change the order up a little bit, and I want to move over to Commissioner Holford Smith. and ask about your thoughts on this.
Well, obviously this is, really, really difficult thing to have to discuss. And part of me wants to side with Michael and say, yes, we should try to preserve it. It probably can be preserved, some parts of it, but it seems like it might be I'm not sure we can compare this to Notre Dame. So I think in a perfect world, I would say, yes, we should try to save as much of this material as possible. But I think given the circumstances of this particular building and location, that trying to do so would really hamstring the congregation. And I don't know that there's enough to keep in situ that's meaningful. I think as much as can be salvaged should be salvaged, but I'd like to hear what other people have to say as well. But I'm a little, quite torn by this one, but leaning towards saying that maybe it's okay to take the towers down, but save as much of it as we can.
Okay, salvage what we can for reuse. And I do think, it is a significant church and congregation, but this is a building within a historic district. And so I think it is hard to compare it to Notre Dame, although I see the connection. But I think bringing it back more locally for me, I think looking at our approach at 60 Norfolk, which was an individual landmark versus a building in a historic district, I think gave me some guidance here and understanding of, our feelings in the past about how much material is meaningful and what does it mean to retain it and how do you retain it. So thank you for those opinions. So I'm going to sort of go back in the normal order now. So Commissioner Chapin.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, this is a difficult one for all of us. My initial hope was that this very beautiful facade could be saved. And while we try to avoid facadism, I thought, look, if only the facade could be saved, it's such a great facade, it's worth it. And, if that was all that was able to be kept. But as we went forward in the discussion and review of all the materials we had, and most recently our own engineer, statement about the limitation of access, the fact that working with the debris pile is interfering with putting up working platforms and the extensive equipment that would be required. The safety concerns, the need to eliminate the overhead risk from overhead elements, all of which he concurred with the applicant on. Gave me a sense that there really were too many safety issues involved here, that really the facade was going to have to be very substantially dismantled. Michael's just raised another issue, a crane. I don't know, we obviously this congregation doesn't have they may not have the issues of Notre Dame, they don't have the resources either that are being sought internationally for assistance on it, financially and otherwise. So, and, as far as putting up a partial building, I think that, this is a church community. They need to rebuild the church. So I don't think a ruin is a suitable solution for this site. So at this point, I'm reluctantly feeling that there really is no alternative except to permit the demolition of this because I don't see a successful way to reconstruct the facade. And I did want to see an effort to keep some of the material, because that is part of our charge as well, not just the architecture, but the historic material. And I was pleased to hear both Ken Fisher and also the Reverend say that was their intent, to do their best to use what was able to be used in new construction. So unless somebody really has got a plan for reconstruction that seems feasible, that I think that's my position as far as the application.
Okay, thank you. All right, Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I'm sort of in agreement with Anne because not only is it a difficult situation, but seems like this type of tragic dilemma that's being thrown to this commission is happening too often. And to your point, Carol, about 60 Norfolk Street, the Beth Hemorrhage Haggadah Synagogue. I remember the valiant effort the LPC staff and the LPC commissioners went to the site in the initial assessment to preserve the towers, and then the subsequent tragedy and that killed that worker. And so that is the reminder. I'm looking at the screen, the original PowerPoint presentation from 2017, 2018. And it is, I think Anne sums it up best, which is in a perfect world, in an ideal world, I believe all the commissioners would love, just like the 60 Norfolk Street, to preserve the tower and have a crane to scoop it up and then, go and airlift, drop it in little by little. But the reality is that I would love to hear if there's a better solution, if there's another solution, alternate solutions that can, way out of this, and also to see if, obviously we cannot do forcing the church to preserve, because given their constraint and tight resources, to see how they can honor and preserve maybe part of the existing fabric. And so I would like to hear the rest of the commissioners.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Bland.
Well, I think the saddest day was the day of the fire. The second saddest day for me was where the fire emanated, the building next door burned down, and we have a vacant site, completely accessible. But now, as is pointed out, we don't live in an ideal world. We live in New York City. And for some reasons that are irritating to me, but understood because we live in New York City, that site is, even though physically completely accessible to the long side of this site, is not going to be allowed to be used to, effectuate a rebuilding or even a saving of what's left. So, and my belief is that some of the most exciting architecture around the world, and certainly even in this country, but less so in this country than other parts of maybe war-ravaged Europe, as was mentioned earlier. Some of the most exciting architecture is the combination of a ruin or a part ruin with a new structure. And to me, it would seem very exciting for this extraordinarily vibrant church in our city to express that architecturally, to be able to express that phoenix rising from the ashes or something like this. So I'm sorry that more of the original fabric doesn't seem to be able to be saved, except through a Notre Dame-ish, which I think is an interesting idea, but I think Notre Dame is an international rescue effort and a state rescue effort by the state of France. The differences are profound. So that can't really happen, I think. So therefore, I'm reluctant, as everybody else is, to say that we knock this thing down to go on. But I'm hopeful that we knock down only what is needed to go on. And that, to me, I would hope that more than just saving some of the fabric and piling up the bricks or the limestone or whatever and using it, that actually parts of the building can be retained in the front part and incorporated by an inventive, ingenious architectural team into something that is meaningful to the community, meaningful to the church itself, of course, and meaningful to architecture. Because I think all of that is possible. But it is sad, very sad, to lose such an important historic building in our city. But life goes on, the city goes on. We've had thousands of these things over the history of our city. I think of Trinity Church, where I was involved for so long at Wall Street itself, was burned, of course, during the Revolution, and was rebuilt into the wonderful Richard Upjohn Church that we now know. But anyway, a little bit beside the point, but there I am. So I can support the application.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lutfi.
My colleagues have made a lot of very thoughtful, insightful comments, many of which I completely agree with. I also want to say, and I wasn't here for the original presentation, but I certainly looked at the videos and have reviewed all the materials, and what happened is horrific and so sad. But it happened to a church that is and a congregation that is, I guess this makes it even sadder in a way, but it also provides a lot of hope. A congregation that's growing and a congregation that is committed to the community in which it has been located, to not only continuing to serve and continuing to grow. And I think that's an important thing to just keep in mind as we look at this project, because my sense is that from the get-go, the intentions have been both from that church's position to do what they can to preserve. And obviously that's the point of view that we come from traditionally as well. But their engineer, along with our engineer, have just corroborated the fact that it's going to be very difficult to do that, and exceedingly could be very dangerous and costly, especially due to the limited access that we have, they have to the site. And I'm not going to reiterate what Fred said about Notre Dame, but I do agree with that point. So I also believe that, so my sense is that this was a beautiful church. Who knows, it may have eventually been a landmark at some point. But right now we're left with, we don't 100% know what we're left with in a way. We understand the instability. We understand that there's a lot of material there, but we don't really know what is going to happen. What we have here is, I'm going to say, a promise, and what I sounds like it will be a good faith effort to preserve material, and to rebuild this church in a way so that, the structure, working with LPC, which I think is really important. And when we're working with applicants, no matter what level we're working with them at, that's the most we can ask for. And this applicant has come to the table saying, we want to work hand in hand with you to build a new church that is going to be contribute to the landscape of this neighborhood and ultimately the city, and it also enable us to serve our congregants. So this is going to be a process. There is no way that we can tell right now how much material is going to be preserved and what that configuration of that material is. So I think for us, what we're saying, if we're voting to approve the taking down of this building with the and rebuilding anew with existing material, and who knows, there may be other elements that could be incorporated. We would be saying, we hear you and we accept what you're saying to us, and that you're going to come and work with us, and that we're going to roll up our sleeves and work with you. And we do that so many ways with so many other applicants. And I feel like right now, the best thing we can do is make that good faith gesture on our part. And I also agree with what Fred said, which is that, the new church could be an amazing building that, in the hands of a very talented architect, could not only make a contribution, but could be potentially a future landmark. And that is also something that we strive for, is to, as new things are built, to make sure that they are going to be contributing in the best way. So I'm all for preserving what can be preserved, but I'm signing up for working, for our staff and us working with this applicant in a way for the best next church possible to be built in this district. So I'm okay with that.
Okay, thank you. And just, I just want to, hear some noise, background noise, and if we could mute that, it would be good. Great. And just, Jeannie, just to kind of push it a little further, and I understand exactly your position, that you're willing to approve the proposal to deconstruct the facade and explore preserving what we can, working collaboratively with the applicants who will have to come back to us. But just to press you a little bit more, does that mean allowing them, as they're proposing, to dismantle it entirely and then explore how to reincorporate salvaged materials, or are you thinking about bringing it down to a certain point and then touching base with us again? I think the issue is that the applicant may not be ready to come in with a new design, and so the dismantling to a certain point would leave it at whatever that is for an extended period of time, and then would require new engagement and efforts by the church to then, take down the rest if in fact it still is not meaningful. So I guess the question is, if it comes down to a certain point, are you agreeing with the church's position that there may be so little of it that it doesn't have meaning and it's okay to remove it completely at this one time? Okay, great.
Yes,
and then reincorporate. Okay.
Right.
Great, thank you. Sorry, that wasn't very clear, but thank you for understanding it. Okay,
Yeah, no,
Commissioner
thank you.
Jefferson. All right, Commissioner Jefferson.
After reviewing the engineer's report, I agree that the building has to be demolished. The extent of demolition, excuse me, I think even saving parts of it would be difficult, and how it's incorporated into new structure is a problem. I think the community has a responsibility to think about what they want their church to be. And I am hopeful, and I wrote here, relieved and hopeful and comforted that this has to go to LPC so that the guidance that LPC commissioners bring to this can give the architect, whatever architect is, a creative input so that he could create a building that, as you said, could become a landmark, a new landmark. But it's the guidance, needs the guidance of the community, the church, and LPC.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Gustafson.
Well, I wanted to be in Commissioner Devonshire's camp on this, but I don't think I can. Even our own engineer says that under the current conditions and all the parameters that we're dealing with, the answer appears to be no. As you look at that picture on the right, in and of itself, that to me is enough fabric, to rebuild. But that's not the question that we're being asked. It starts, with all due respect to Chair Carroll, not with a philosophical issue, but with a safety issue, which is to say, I can certainly believe, and I think all of us can believe, that there is enough in that picture on the right to preserve it. But for safety's sake, parts of that have to be dismantled, and doing that raises secondary safety issues. I think the process here worked, which is to say, the applicant provided a good faith position about situation with regard to engineering and safety. We hired our own expert and pushed back on that, and the applicant came back to us in good faith again, and we went back to them in good faith. So, the process worked itself out the way it's supposed to. It may not make everyone in the preservation community happy, but, when it comes down to it, we are where we are. And so I do agree that they can demolish the rest of the structure as is required. I am triggered in some part by what Commissioner Bland commented about, although I'm less sanguine about it than he is, which is to say, I'm appalled that a New York City property owner is so callous to the landmark that there is no negotiation to find a happy place between them and their empty lot, which, by the way, I'm staring at on a screen here on Google Maps right now. And indeed, it is an empty lot, and I didn't find any approved permits on it, but that's okay. Maybe there are. But somewhere in there is a negotiation that says that they'll be indemnified for any risk and loss, and that they would work together to figure out what that timing is. Is it 6 months? Is it 9 months? Is it 3 months? Whatever it is, that they would need that access. And that would save the rest of this building. So I know New Yorkers are going to be New Yorkers, but that doesn't mean I think that I respect that. So in the end, I accept that it has to be taken down. But I do also feel, as some of my fellow commissioners do, that there is something to be saved here. And there could be quite a bit to be saved, and it may require a little bit of extra work to save it. No one on this commission wants anyone's life to be at risk in saving that material, so that we understand. But we do actually want them to act again in good faith as they have, and preserve what they can of the materials or structures or pieces, components of this once terrific structure.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Thanks. So firstly, as others have, I really want to acknowledge the loss, not just of a physical building, but a kind of another kind of loss to the congregation and to the community. And just to say that I was very moved and found compelling all of their testimony and their voices and their commitment to this place. What I have found sort of problematic has been the kind of the first logic that's been presented to us, mostly, let's say, by some of the consultants, but in general. And the logic says we want you, Commission, to be concerned about the volume, the amount of material that likely will need to be removed in order to gain safe access to further assessment and to potential reconstruction. We want for you to be concerned about the loss of how much material, and yet we want for you to approve a total demolition. Those two things seem to be in a kind of a contradiction that I can't quite get my head around. I don't understand how we can be asked to be concerned about loss of substantial material and at the same time be asked in that cause to approve a total demolition. So that is a premise that's very, very difficult for me to swallow and get past. But I'll move on for a second from that. The next thing is that I think it's important to say that most, if not all, significant restorations do require significant dismantling and rebuilding. Rebuilding. That's the nature of restoration. And there are proponents of restoration as an idea and as an effort, as a methodology, and there are detractors. And one can understand both, because certainly restoration is a kind of it's an aspect of it that seeks authenticity but is inauthentic ultimately. But it almost always requires a substantial, if not total, dismantling. I mean, this is not a physical edifice, but if you go to the Frick site, there's not a remnant of that garden that we required be preserved in place. It will be rebuilt. So, so that's I think an important thing to say. Then this issue of the congregation's desire to rebuild, and with respect to this, I of course, just like as others have, thought about Notre Dame, and it is clear that the intention there, with all of its capacity and international celebrity, and the fact that it is and as a symbol of Paris, chose to rebuild and brought all the resources to bear. Here, the congregation's choice may not be to fully rebuild, and the building as it was, and in a district I respect and can understand and agree with that perspective. But I do think that I want us to consider this idea that what if the congregation, maybe not the existing leadership this moment, but a board of trustees or something, wanted to sell the property? Would the absence of any vestige of the building be a loss? This is, now we're talking about an urbanistic, a spatial, a loss of artifacts. A loss. Would we have longed for a memory of that place, of that material? And that brings me to an understanding that, yes, in fact, the stuff of the building is important to retain. And I would say, well, maybe a day ago, I would have thought maybe just some of the bricks. Now, I think actually when I see image number 3, more of the system, more of the architectural assembled elements to be retained or reconstructed. And so I feel as though and as Jean Lutfi has pointed out, the commission has worked in a very collaborative and positive and constructive way with other applicants in new buildings that incorporate and how they incorporate the elements of historic fabric in their new construction and their new design, and have enabled and approved and helped and championed that, with the example of the Park Avenue Church, of course. So my feeling about this is that not only is not simply that material should be retained post total demolition, but that the applicants should actually go into this project with the intention to save, well, I don't know, image number 3, or a half of an image number 3, some portion of this, and they should come to us with a proposal to do that. And I would feel that would be a better approach than our approving the full demolition in order to not lose material. So I think that is my position at this point. Not demolition, certainly not the true rebuilding of the entire building, and the retention of a significant part of this, or a part that can be retained, but for the applicant to come to us sooner than later in order to propose that and get our approval and partnership and work, for us to work together with them on that.
Okay, thank you. And I think, the question, I think, and I know you were sort of reconciling with the applicants asking us to consider what has to be removed to request more demolition. And I think really the reason that they're asking us to consider what has to be removed and knowing that it may be more is because I think that their argument is that what remains would not have integrity. But I think, I've heard from others that the material does, and I myself believe that materiality has and fabric has the ability to provide some evocation or sense of place, even if the building itself doesn't have integrity, or the fragments of the building are not a building anymore and don't have integrity. So I think where we are is we have 6 who would support the application to take down the entire building, with the caveat that the applicant continue to work with us as they have on salvaging materials and for reuse, storing and saving for reuse, and that we would work hand in hand through that process. As have also been mentioned, we have worked collaboratively with many applicants as they go through their process to ensure that we all are working together toward the same goal. And so I think we can do a motion to support the proposal, the condition as they have committed to saving fabric and working closely with the staff along the staff and or commission along the way, depending on the choices that are made. And of course, the new building will come back to the commission. So let me go ahead and make that motion, and then we'll see where we are and just see if I got that right. Okay. Let me just, now I have to find it. Hang on. In the matter of docket number 23-02975, 112 Second Avenue in the East Village, Lower East Side Historic District. This is an Gothic Revival Church style church building designed by Samuel Barag and Reed and built in 1891 to 92. This is an application to demolish the remaining facade and foundation after the building experienced a fire. And I note that the church and the neighboring building at 114 Second Avenue suffered a fire on December 5th, 2020, which destroyed significant portions of the church building. That a full vacate order was issued by the Department of Buildings due to structural concerns, and that a certificate of no effect was issued for emergency work, including partial demolition of approximately 2/3 of the building envelope in order to stabilize the primary towers and central gable. And I recommend approval with modifications that the building suffered a very serious fire that resulted in significant damage to the building, including the loss of the roof, interior, and the east and north walls, and considerable structural damage to the remaining south party wall and primary facade. That portions of the remaining building, including the north and south spires and locations of destabilized masonry at the primary facade, are structurally unsound and need to be removed for safety. That portions of the limestone primary facade and much of the brick on the back of the primary facade are damaged. That access to the site is only available through the front on Second Avenue, making inspection, probing, stabilization, and remediation of the remaining primary facade infeasible due to the need to eliminate overhead risks to ensure work safety. That making the site safe will require the removal of significant portions of the north and south towers and the gable, resulting in only fragments of the original building remaining. That the overall loss of historic fabric due to the fire, structural issues, damaged masonry and woodwork, and partial deconstruction to make the site safe will result in a building that no longer retains its own integrity or as a building that contributes to the historic district. That the removals will be closely monitored on site by a qualified engineer. That given the catastrophic loss of historic fabric, the building has lost its integrity, and that little preservation purpose is gained by requiring the applicant to reconstruct the building. And that appropriate reference to the building can be accomplished through the future design review of a new building. However, I recommend that the applicant salvage materials that may be salvaged during demolition and consider ways to incorporate portions of the building, the limestone, or specific architectural features into the design of the new building, and that the applicant will work closely with the commission throughout the process of the demolition and the redesign process. So I think that I have, I think I've got what the consensus is. So Commissioner Holford Smith, would you second that motion?
I actually had a question.
Okay.
Because you said recommend, and we talked about whether we are able to require them to
Yes,
the extent possible.
Yes, we are requiring it.
Okay.
I said recommend, that's our normal format, but that means require.
Okay. All right. That I second it.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mark, will you call the vote?
Yes, give me 1 second. Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Bland.
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Bear.
Nay.
Commissioner Chapin.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire.
Nay.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson. Commissioner Jefferson. You unmute.
Aye.
Aye. Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 8 in favor and 2 opposed, the motion passes.
All right, so that's approved with the condition that you salvage whatever material is salvageable for reuse, and we'll continue to work very closely with you. And again, thank you for all of your efforts here and your continued patience as we reviewed this very carefully. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Right, we'll move to the next, we'll go back to the public hearing agenda, move to the next public hearing item.
Right, and for anyone who just joined, we skip ahead a little bit, so we'll be moving back to public hearing item number 5. That is LPC 23-04335, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1227, Lot 1, 400 West End Avenue in the Riverside West End Historic District Extension 1. It's an Art Deco style apartment building designed by Morgan and Holder and built in 1930 to 31, and the application is to replace windows.
And commissioners, staff will be walking you through this presentation. Staff, you now have control of the application. Presentation, you may begin.
All right, good afternoon, commissioners. Michelle Crayon, preservation staff. This application is for work at 400 West End Avenue, specifically for the replacement of windows at the 7th floor of the West 79th Street and West End Avenue facades. As you can see in the 1940s tax photo and in these zoomed in versions, the building originally had multi-light steel casement windows. However, by the 1980s on the right, all or most of the windows at the primary facades had been replaced by metal 1/1 double hung windows. And that is the condition that remains today and has been the case since designation of this historic district. This proposal is before you today because the owners of this unit would like to replace 11 of those windows with new metal clad wood windows in the same configuration and color. In these photos, you can see that the majority of the existing windows are 1/1 double hung units, with some single light tilt and turn or casement units existing at select locations throughout the building. In 2019, the commission previously approved a similar installation of new 1/1 double hung metal windows at a unit on the 15th floor. The applicant has also included the example of 505 West End Avenue, where the commission previously approved 1/1 windows in place of multi-light windows that had existed there historically. That's the building in the center. And then on the right is 5 Riverside Drive, an Art Deco style apartment building that historically had both double hung and casement windows. In addition, 310 Riverside Drive on the left and 315 Riverside Drive are 2 other examples of Art Deco style apartment buildings nearby that historically had 1/1 double hung windows, in addition to some casement windows on the left. Too far. And these are just some photos of the existing metal windows, which appear to likely date to the 1980s. Drawings of the existing details typical of metal windows. And then this slide shows the proposed details and finish, which will match the finish of the existing windows and those throughout the building. The applicant is here to provide additional details and answer your questions.
Good afternoon, commissioners. My name is David Mabbott. I'm the architect on this project. I just wanted to add a couple items. The existing windows, they're not in great shape. They do want to be replaced. We are proposing to install a good quality thermal window. We think that it's a good product. We believe that it matches quite nicely to the front facade and continuing this double hung relationship, which I don't think is going away. I will note that in the last time that the commission looked at this building in 2019, there was an interest on the behalf of the commission for a master plan for this building, which I certainly fully support. I will say that the co-op board is not at that place yet. I think that they're struggling with a number of different items in the building. I'm doing what I can to push them forward into the suggestion of doing a master plan, which would be good, but they certainly aren't there, and that's why we are continuing to propose this for a single apartment. That's my take.
Okay, thank you. All right, commissioners, do we have any questions? All right, so let's move to public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand and I will turn it over to Sonia Gior to take us through the testimony.
Thank you. We do have several signups in advance, and our first speaker will be Mark Diller, and I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Mark Diller, member of Community Board 7 and its Preservation Committee, with thanks to the co-chairs, Michelle Parker and Kay Carpin, who are allowing me to speak today. In view of the prior approvals of similar windows on a similar frontage, both wrapping around two primary facades of this building, two different primary facades. And the likelihood that, as I believe the applicant just said, that the 1/1 condition is not going away anytime soon. The committee and the full board took a very pragmatic approach that consistency in this very important, as you may remember, is directly across the street from the individual landmark Apthorpe building and is therefore joint anchors of a very important West End Avenue landscape or vista. That consistency and that appearance is important. At the time that we last opined on this building back in 2019, we noted that the Commission's approach to replacement windows, inquiring as to whether there was sufficient decoration and ornamentation on the facade such that the elimination of divided light windows would not be inappropriate, was resolved both by our board and by the Commission in favor of that replacement. We see no reason to diverge from that result here and therefore recommend approval to you all. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Megan Fitzpatrick from Landmark West, and I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Hello, Commissioners. Megan Fitzpatrick for Landmark West. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee finds that in absence of a Windows master plan, we would favor replacement in kind. The current non-original double-hung windows are at least consistent throughout the landmark. Introducing new profiles and taking this variant condition one step further may be an improvement, but does not pave the way for long-term stewardship of the structure. We urge the applicant to invest in the long-range study of historic conditions and any extent original windows in order to draft an informed Windows master plan. This will ensure consistency in keeping with the landmark site. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee urges the Commission to take no action, and our committee suggests the applicant prepare a master plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Lucy Levine of the Historic Districts Council, and I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine, speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. At HDC, we concur with our colleagues at Landmarks West that these windows should be part of a master plan and feel that the master plan should be based on the building's historic window configuration. Thank you.
Thank you. So we do not have any additional signups in advance, and I'm not seeing any hands raised presently, so I'll turn it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, I'd like to turn back to the applicant and ask if you would like to respond to the questions. We've heard already from you that the building is not ready to propose a master plan, and really the benefit of the master plan is for the building. It's an administrative tool. It is not, it in some ways doesn't benefit our regulation, it benefits the owner because they can then get more expeditious approvals because we only have to require the drawings once. So it's really kind of an administrative tool that allows for those expedited approvals since the materials are approved as a prototype. But we, it's a benefit that they don't have to take advantage of, and we can't require it, but we know that we have definitely urged people to consider it, and you've talked to them about it. But are there any other aspects of the testimony that you'd like to respond to?
No, I don't think so. It's straightforward.
Okay. All right, commissioners, do we have any other questions? Okay, I'm going to send you all requests to unmute so that we can begin our discussion. And as we've heard from Community Board 7, this is a property that we have reviewed before, where we have looked at one-off applications for individual units for 1/1 windows. And given the fact that all of the historic windows were removed prior to designation, and the fact that the building has a certain level of ornament, some commissioners have been comfortable with continuing to approve 1/1 here as an individual application. Others, we are often, as you know, split on this decision, but we'll have our discussion and we'll see where we are on that. Commissioner Shamir Barron, would you like to start this one?
Oh, we didn't close the hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. All right, Commissioner Gustafson, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, let's begin our discussion now. Audie?
Yes, I think what is being proposed, the 1/1 are acceptable here. I mean, I think master plan would be ideal, but I think that this is appropriate.
Thank you. Commissioner Chapin.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
There's something
we can hear
going on
you.
with my, okay. I feel like we have had many positions over the years on these windows. I feel in this case that the original windows would be, that we should actually go back toward them, and that they should have a master plan. So on this one, that's the position I'm going to take.
Okay. All right. And I do think though, I want to note that we have approved the 1/1 on this building before. Okay, we'll go on. Commissioner.
Yeah, Sarah, how recent was that?
Michelle, can I ask you to give us that date again, of the most recent one?
Yeah, it was in 2019.
So I think that was about the time that we were coming to the sort of practice of looking at the level of the position on the corner and the level of ornament to understand whether the building was robust enough in its style that the lack of muntins wouldn't detract from the style.
Yeah, I was kind of looking at the brickwork to see if I felt that way. I guess, I also think we should not be totally inconsistent. So I will support it then.
Okay, Commissioner Bland.
I'm also able to support it as we have in the past on this building.
Commissioner Lutfi.
I support this and would also like to go on record once again to recommend that the building do a master plan. Then
they don't have to come back to us.
They'll have a consistent quality window that everyone will have to use.
Great. Commissioner Jefferson.
I can support this.
Okay, Commissioner Gustafson.
Well, then I guess I stand alone. The forever right or forever wrong, I don't think they've established here that this facade has sufficient ornamentation to justify the 1/1s, and so I'm not there.
Okay, all right, thanks. All right, and I would go along with those who support it, because I think we did find that it had sufficient detail in the last round, but again, it really encouraged the applicant to consider a master plan so that they can have a final one-type approval that would ensure consistency throughout the building, but also would allow them to continue to get expedited approvals. Okay, so Commissioner Shamir Baron, would you read the motion?
Yes. In the matter of LPC 2304335, 400 West End Avenue, Riverside, West End Historic District Extension 1, an Art Deco style apartment building designed by Margon Holder and built in 1930 to 31, the applications to replace windows. I note that the building's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Riverside West End Historic District Extension 1, and further note that at the time of designation, most of the multi-light casement windows were replaced with 1/1 double-hung windows and single-pane tilt and turn windows. I recommend approval, finding that the vast majority of the historic multi-light casement windows at the street facades of this building were replaced prior to the designation of the historic district, and therefore the work will not further diminish a cohesive historic fenestration. That the existing 1/1 double-hung windows to be removed are not historic, therefore the work will not eliminate significant historic fabric. That the proposed dark brown finished metal-clad wood 1/1 double-hung window will be consistent with windows historically found at other buildings of this type and age found in this historic district. The proposed 1/1 double-hung windows will maintain a unified fenestration pattern at the building's facades, and that the work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the building or the Riverside West End Historic District Extension 1.
Thank you. And Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thank you. Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Nay.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
Commissioner- With 6 in favor and 1 opposed, the motion passes.
All right, that's approved, and we'll move to the next item.
Next item is public hearing item number 6, LPC 23-04843, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1390, Lot 57, 20 East 76th Street in the Upper East Side Historic District. This is a neoclassical style apartment building designed by Schwartz and Gross and built in 1925 to 26. The application is to modify openings, place an entrance canopy, replace windows and doors, and alter the rooftop addition.
And commissioners, the applicants have joined the hearing. You now have control of the presentation. State your name for the record and you may begin.
Hi, I'm Todd Poisson, partner at BKSK Architects. My partner Harry Kendall is here as well. He might add some comments later, and Ethan Feldman will be advancing the slides. So we could start. Okay, so the overall good news here is that we're reviving a hotel that has been closed, and among other things, we're bringing back the residential use to the upper floors. That change of use has little exterior effect, but we thought you might like to know that. We'll talk about it again in a minute, but the building had in 1926 larger residential apartments upstairs. And we like that that's part of our story here. It's important to us to include part of bringing back the building to 1926 in a way. As you can see in the middle rendering, we're proposing to replace all the windows with the original configuration of 6/6 divided light windows, bringing back the texture that the original building had. We'll talk more about the windows in a bit. We're proposing those same windows throughout the building, including the lot line walls and rear court walls. Most of that is under staff review. So the 3 chapters we want to quickly talk about are the street facade, rooftop mechanical work, and some windows, some new windows proposed for the west lot line wall. First, we wanted to very briefly introduce ownership to the commission. In the interest of time, we're going to do that for them. They've graciously allowed us to speak on their behalf. They are here to answer questions later, but next slide to quickly show their work, a bit of just a sample of their work. We are really honored to be working with these 2 incredible groups from Europe, RB Capital from London, and Corinthia Hotels based in Malta. Both brands of both RB and Corinthia really honor and celebrate the quality of historic adaptive reuse and preservation and restoration. Next slide is some of Corinthia's work. The previous slide was RB. They have incredible properties throughout the world, and we're really thrilled to be part of among their first properties in the United States, let alone New York. Okay, next. So we are in the Upper East Side, located in the Upper East Side Historic District, almost at the southwest corner of Madison Avenue and East 76th Street. The designation report calls out the materiality of the building and makes special note of the stone detailing around the front door, and notes that it was built as a 16-story hotel, apartment hotel. Next. Here you can see in the middle photo from around 1926, the stone detailing mentioned in the designation report around the front doors, making a 2-story entry composition on the facade. The view to that composition is somewhat compromised, somewhat obstructed now with a marquee, and that's something we want to address in the coming pages. You could also see what are still very beautiful oculuses above those flanking doors to the left and right of the front door. Those are covered now with the fixed awnings that we are removing. To the left, in the 1926 residential hotel Surrey brochure, the lower left of that, you could see 2 single windows next to the service door at the corner of the building. So there's this inherent asymmetry to the ground floor that we will be referring to with our proposal of ground floor modifications. You could also see in the bulkhead, there's that kind of heroic water tower bulkhead with what we've come to call these shoulders. They're clad in brick on each side of the bulkhead. That reading of those shoulders has kind of been lost over time too, something we want to talk about in a bit. The plans, upper right plan is the larger, one of the larger apartments from harking back to the original configuration and use of the building of a large apartment, and the typical plan below showing 1 or 2 room units in the typical floor. Next. So I'm going to talk about the street facade first. So the yellow areas are where we're proposing to work, which remain in the public hearing realm. We'll look at each of these separately. The drawing on the right is the proposed street elevation showing the new simulated double hung painted aluminum replacement windows with divided lights throughout. And we're proposing the 2 colors shown on the right. If you look at the 1940 tax lot photo of the neighbor, but you could catch the west end of our building. You can see there are 2 colors of window frames, a lighter color in the 2-story limestone base, plus the 3rd floor with the limestone medallions, and then a second, somewhat darker color used on the 4th floor up. The 1979 photo on the far left shows that asymmetrical ground floor with 2 single windows next to the service door that survived through to 2009. You can also see some mechanical penetrations on the 2nd floor windows. We're closing up next. Existing conditions in both photograph and drawing. Next, now we're backing up the timeline to 1926, the original 2 single windows next to the service door, which remained unaltered, except for the windows, all the windows being replaced with 1/1 windows sometime before 2009, or actually in the 1980s, we think. Next. Now the proposed condition at the bottom here with the existing condition on top, with the location of one of those original single windows shown in red. And we'd like to use that location and restore the limestone work around it and extend the single masonry opening down to grade for an entrance. And same for the single window location next to the service door to the left of that, which remains in place. The fixed awnings are removed and a pair of doors at the far right are proposed in the existing window masonry opening extending to grade as well. Next is the same drawing on the bottom, the proposed condition for the elevation, along with the plan to explain some of these doors. From left to right in plan, the existing service door, which is also the cellar egress door. Then the next door is the egress door for a new relocated fire stair, updating the hotel's fire stairs to have 1 exit directly to grade. The next single door becomes the restaurant entrance and exit. And then to the far right, the pair of doors allow service to a sidewalk cafe from lounge. Next. Zooming in a little bit on the proposed single doors at the left side. The service door is replaced in the same location. The new door, as well as all the ground floor doors and windows, are painted the lighter of the 2 proposed colors shown earlier. with a divided light pattern and slightly recessed lower panel. Same for the proposed restaurant door with a surface mounted plaque or menu board next to it. Next. Sections through the 2 new doors showing the masonry openings extended to the sidewalk with limestone returns to match the adjacent stonework, and showing the doors located in section in the same plane as the windows they are replacing. Next. So the marquee. The marquee was approved and added in 2010. And we're retaining the entire perimeter framing and the finished detailing, repainting it to match the new ground floor windows and door colors, that kind of lighter color. However, we'd like to reconfigure the glass top and redesign how the marquee drains back to the building in order to reduce the bulkiness of that framing element that's against the stonework, to improve sight lines to the detailing up there. The new entry pairs of doors below would receive an ornamental metal screen at the glass lights. Next, a section through the marquee showing the reconfigured glass sloping to enable the drainage within the perimeter framing back to the building. This is the pair of doors at the far right of the facade where there's a pair of existing windows, masonry opening being extended down to the ground to allow access to the sidewalk cafe. Similar in detailing to the other new doors in terms of the slightly recessed lower panel under divided light doors and fixed transoms. Next. Okay, so 14th and 16th floor. The yellow highlights here mark area of proposed work, as well as something up there on the roof. At the 14th floor, the yellow highlight at the left reflects an existing terrace door flanked by 2 narrow double hung windows. We propose to replace that assembly with a pair of muttoned terrace doors. And on the right side of the 14th floor, we're proposing swapping what you see there in the existing yellow condition, swapping the 2 doors on the right and the pair of windows so that the terrace doors are more central and the pair of windows is outlying. On 16th floor, we're taking that small bathroom window and filling that with brick to match the facade and opening up a new window to create a pair of windows like all the other pairs of windows up there to create a symmetrical condition. The yellow thing on top, the elevation, is a remnant greenhouse wall that was added in the 1970s, the roof of which was removed in 2010, and it became a mechanical pen open to the sky. We're going to talk about that in the mechanical chapter next, but you could see in the proposed rendering in the lower left, by removing that and pushing the mechanical back a bit, you can now have that those brick shoulders of the bulkhead more legible again than it's become over time. Next. This is the shop drawing for the windows that are being proposed for the replacement windows. In this case, the pair window type, which is the most prevalent type of window on the street facade. It's a simulated, we're proposing simulated double hung, meaning the lower sash is recessed from the upper sash, but has an in-swing casement operation. This operation improves the thermal and acoustic performance of the windows to meet project requirements. Next, we're going to barge into the mechanical units on top. So the timeline's up on the top row there. In the 1970s, the second row, a greenhouse was added to the top floor. In 2010, the next drawing over to the right, the roof was removed and it's open to the sky. And then the upper right, as described in the rendering before, we're pushing the wall back, clad it in brick, push it back 4 feet 2 inches in order to, and it's probably most best seen in the lower right roof plan drawing to enable those 2 shoulders to kind of show themselves again. Next. So this is actually our drawing for the rooftop mock-up we provided the contractor, but it's very useful as kind of a diagram for the rooftop work being proposed, especially the axon in the lower left. So starting at the left side of the axon, we're going to replace a metal pipe railing with a brick parapet. And behind that is a 4-foot extension of the elevator bulkhead. And then moving to the front of the axon, the red dotted plane represents the new brick wall, which will be pushed back from the face of the bulkhead 4 foot 2 inches to make those shoulders legible. And then the taller part of the bulkhead is behind that. At its highest, the taller piece would be 5 feet taller than the current mechanical fence. So that whole greenhouse became a mechanical pen open to the sky. We're recreating that kind of idea, but pushing it back in space for a reason that will be evident hopefully soon. Next, other than the shoulders. Upper left is photograph of the mock-up. Really the only thing there, because we didn't push the greenhouse back yet, but you can see a glimpse of orange on the upper left photograph. And that's the railing being replaced by a brick parapet, which will match the adjacent brick. And behind that, you can see a little flash of orange, which is the elevator bulkhead being extended. On the upper right photo, the mock-up, you could see the proposed taller mechanical fence being pushed back toward the rear. And you could see how it allows views to, there's almost like Palladian detailing to that brick water tower bulkhead that becomes a little more visible by pushing the mechanical bulk back a bit. Okay, you also see in some of these renderings, you might notice some proposed lot line windows that are, many of which are under staff review. We'll discuss in a minute where they're under staff review. Okay, next we're going to move into Central Park. And you could glimpse the new brick mechanical pen wall and the taller mechanical acoustic fence behind from two vantage points through the trees there. And the mock-up is pretty fair in the proposed renderings. Tell a story there through it's glimpsed and zoomed in through the trees. Next, we're going to finish our lap around the building. The upper left photo shows the brick parapet as mocked up in orange. You could barely see it, but it's this tiny little line of orange to the right of the building. And same on the right, upper right mock-up photograph. In this case, it's a sunlight washed out stripe of yellow up there, barely visible. Next page is the last chapter, the west lot line windows. So we're proposing new windows on the west side wall. There is a staff-approved replacement program from last year that's shown next here, is drawn here, shown next to the photo. Then to the right of that is an existing elevation. And then to the right of that is our proposal to add a row of new windows towards the front of the building to increase views to Central Park by pairing the existing window there with a partner, creating a pair of windows, plus a new window on 2 higher floors next to the existing chimney, and then 3 new windows to the right of the chimney as well. And that's clear, probably easier to see on the last page here, where we have a rendering next to the existing photograph and a close-up elevation fragment. And I think that's it. Let's make sure,
Great.
Ethan. Is there anything
Thank
more?
you.
That's it. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, commissioners, do we have any questions? Okay, I don't see any questions at this time, so let's move to public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to testify on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you, and I will turn it over to Sonia Gior to take us through the testimony.
Thank you. We do have several signups in advance. And so our first speaker will be Nuha Ansari from Friends of the Upper East Side. And I'll be promoting you to panelists now. And if you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Chair Carroll and Honourable Commissioners, my name is Nuha Ansari and I'm speaking
We lost you for a moment. Are you able to continue your testimony?
I wonder if we should move to the next person while we try to get her back.
Yeah, okay. Our next speaker then will be John Graham, and I'm promoting you to panelist now. And if you can please unmute your mic and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Good afternoon, commissioners and Harry. John Graham for the Victorian Society in New York. We find much of the proposed work commendable. The altered masonry openings at the upper floors appear largely restorative. The rooftop changes will have minimal effect on the appearance of the building. And while the additions will be visible, we think the distances are great enough that their effect will also be minimal. The enlargement of the window openings on the west lot line secondary wall will have a minimal effect on the building's design. We are glad to see the return to the historic 6/6 window configuration and appreciate the attention to detail seen in the change in sash color at the 3-story base, documented in the historic photos. However, we think there's a problem with the proposed very wide, nearly 3.5-inch stepped back meeting rails in these apparently inoperable windows. This detail needs to be revised to match the appearance and proportions of the historic windows before these windows should be approved. At the ground floor, we think dropping the sills of existing windows to create door openings has been done sensitively and will result in an architecturally harmonious ground floor configuration. However, we recommend that the solid panels on all the secondary glazed doors be lowered to match the panels on the 2 existing doors flanking the main entrance, which also aligns with the joint between the 2 lowest masonry courses. Regarding the canopy, provided the glazed sections to be replaced are not historic, we have no significant detail. We think replacement is appropriate. However, if they are historic and decorative, we believe this proposed work should be reconsidered. Thank you very much, commissioners.
Thank you. So, Nuha, I'm sorry, I'm going to bring you in as a panelist again. Hopefully this works. And if you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Nuha, are you able to unmute your line? I'm not sure what sort of difficulties she's having. We don't have any other speakers signed up, and there are no hands raised. Sarah, I'm not sure if you wanted to continue or.
Well, let me see. They did submit a letter in advance, right? So we could maybe just quickly look at that. Right. So I think that the letter that was submitted had concerns about the presentation materials not being complete and not being clear about what was staff level versus commission level, and they had a variety of opinions on various aspects of the proposal. So I hesitate to summarize that for them. So why don't we, do we have a phone number where we can try to reach her? And in the meantime, we can ask the applicants to respond to the comments we have heard.
I'll try to reach her, and I'll also note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 8 recommends approval.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, Harry and Todd, would you like to respond to the comments?
You'll hopefully we'll get Nuha's response, but I think they were given a earlier presentation to look at that had the full scope, that then over time scope was removed for staff review, and
yeah, so right, they're not wrong in being a little confused, although we did meet with them very recently to answer a few questions. So, and the tone of that meeting, Todd, you can speak to it. It was very amicable.
Okay, well, how about the testimony that we did hear? Are there comments? There were some comments on details, for example, the mullions in the windows.
Ethan, can you bring up this shop drawing page? The meeting rail of the proposed window. We could zoom in on that dimension. So first zoom in on the section, on the existing section, or to the left, there's a dimension. We can't Can we dimension? Oh, we can't zoom in. Can you zoom in? I can't zoom in.
It does not seem like I can zoom in, sorry.
I can tell you though, that dimension. It's on page 18. So the dimension, the existing dimension of the meeting rail is 1 5/8, and the proposed meeting rail total is 3 3/8. But let's zoom into the section on the right.
You can't zoom in.
Oh, sorry. Right, thank you. If one were to zoom into the section on the right, you'd see that the lower sash is set back in the kind of appropriate double hung sort of way. So the 3.5 inch for this scale window, we thought was more than appropriate. It's almost a 6 foot tall window. So the almost a 3.5 inch meeting rail, including the 2 sashes together. Only the front rail is about 2 inches of that 3 3/8. Seemed appropriate for us.
Great, thank you. And Corey, I think when we have approved these high performance windows that both operate, the lower sash operates like a casement, but we often see it for practical purposes tilting in. The meeting rail is a little bit thicker. Is this consistent with the other window types we've approved? Granted, they've been for smaller buildings, maybe a different scale window.
It is. In almost all cases, there is a taller overall dimension, but as is the case in this proposal, the lower rail of the top sash is somewhat narrow, like the historic windows. It's the thickness of the operable sash frame inset that gives it that extra 1.5 inches or so. So this is very consistent with past approvals. And in fact, it's just the technicality of the operation not tilting in and as a hopper and instead as a casement, and also the proposed finish in this case, which I think is a sort of a metallic type finish.
Okay. All right. And can you just remind us what the finish of the windows is?
Sure. Let's go back to the earlier page, Ethan, please. There's 2 Duranar painted aluminum colors. The darker is called Quaker Bronze. This is a photograph of both of the color chips. The darker is Quaker Bronze, and the lower one's just called Light Bronze. It is a factory finish. It's metallic, but in a sense, but that it has kind of an eggshell sheen, but it does not have the mica in it that some like truly metallic finishes have. So it doesn't have that the truly metallic finish. It has more of a subdued shop painted finish.
Okay, so they're sort of like a dark beige and a dark brown that look like an aluminum color, a bronze color, but are actually a painted finish.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Sonia, any luck? No?
No, I wasn't able to reach her. Okay, actually, she's back in the Zoom now. Nuha, I'm allowing you to speak instead of making you a panelist. Maybe that'll work. You should be able
Hi,
to.
can you hear me?
Yes, great. Okay.
Oh, great. Sorry about that. Chair Carroll and Honourable Commissioners, my name is Nuha Ansari and I'm speaking on behalf of Friends of the Upper East Side Historic Districts. Friends Preservation Committee commends the sensitive approach taken with the proposed modifications to the building facade. We especially appreciate the attention to historical detail in the replacement of windows to match the style of the building's original 6/6 double hung windows, which our committee had encouraged the building's then owners to consider at the Certificate of Appropriateness hearing in 2009. The new windows, together with the ground floor facade modifications to reveal the details of the stonework on the limestone base of this Schwartz & Gross apartment hotel, will create a more unified and balanced facade. Friends Preservation Committee does, however, lament the fact that the presentation materials do not include the parts of the proposal that will be subject to staff level review. We feel that this has an impact on the understanding of the full scope of alterations to the building. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'll turn it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Thank you. Okay, so I think in the end that was fairly supportive of the commission level aspects of this, but Carrie and Todd, are there any final comments you'd like to make before we move to our discussion?
There was a very thoughtful comment early about the size of the glass portion of the doors on the ground floor being proposed that are slightly high, the base of which is the recess panel is slightly higher than the solid base of the two flanking masonry openings that were doors that are now fixed in place. And the comment was to kind of equalize them. And we felt that to maintain that composition of those three beautiful stone entry doors, the two flankings and the main one, was to just dial in a little bit of a difference between those doors. And in so doing, just lifted the glass a bit higher than that, also to kind of reflect that they used to be window openings.
Okay, thank you. All right, commissioners, do we have any final questions? Okay, I'm sending you all requests to unmute. All right, and Commissioner Shamir Baran, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion, and there are a number of components to this application, including modifying window openings to accommodate new doors at the ground level, and along with alterations to the marquee and a small plaque, the installation of high performance windows throughout that have details that are comparable to other high performance windows that we have approved in the past, but we frequently see a window that bottom sash that tilts in, and this one will be a casement operation. Modifying window openings at the setback floors, creating new lot line windows, setting back the modern penthouse, and raising the parapet and the rooftop, installation of rooftop mechanical equipment. So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Gustafson, would you like to start this one?
Yeah, you're right. There are a lot of elements to this, but it's actually all seems to me to be relatively easy, which is to say, in the end, I think everything that I've seen here is appropriate. I think what they're doing is very sensitive to the landmark. Conversion of windows to doors at the base is fine. The addition of the multi-light panel doors, I think, is a plus, giving us hearkening back to the fenestration of the building throughout from the beginning. The marquee doesn't raise any concerns for me at all. Or the materials on the there are 4 or 5 aspects to what's going on that roof. All of which I think are at such an enormous distance from view corridors that it's that none of them resemble a beacon to me. So I don't think anybody will even notice those changes, and if they do, they're subtle and positive. So in the end, and I know that there was some question about the metallic finish. The metallic quality of the finishes on the door and the window infill, and that I think the point that the applicant made, that they're not actually metallic in the sense of the metal flake, answers any concerns there for me.
Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Shamir Baran.
I agree with a lot of Commissioner Gustafson's comments, in that I see that most of the things that are being proposed for the project are, I think, appropriate and will. I mean, this is such a wonderful building and such a wonderful, amazing block that it's good to begin with, and great bones. And I especially think that the doors on the ground floor really don't detract from the experience of the building, and to the extent that they sort of do kind of conjure the historic sketch a bit, but windows or doors would have done that. I think and while all of the opening frames today are very black, I do think that this building can take another kind of finish, a lighter finish potentially, but I would say that it would be, if there is an intention for it to be sort of shiny, I think that that's not correct. It should be, a brushed kind of finish that's more like a worked light metal color. I think that would be perfectly acceptable in this building. The only concerns or questions that I have are about the lot line windows on the south as well as on the west, And it feels to me as though there is one too many on the south. I don't know if you can please go to that elevation, but a line of windows, one too many in terms of the 3 lines that are added on the west, on the south, and on the west, the few windows in the kind of that thin space, and I don't remember which floor it's on, seem to be excessive and seem to kind of detract from the sense of this kind of lot line secondary window experience. So I'll just if you can get to the elevations, then I can go quickly. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. So the previous one, please, for a moment. Yeah. So wait, that's not south. Okay, south. Let's go to south. Whatever. We're on west. That's fine. We can see west right there, and it feels to me like that whatever that floor is, it's 3 floors from the roof, from the top, in that small sliver there that's furthest most west, feels to me to be a bit much there. I mean, it's not a giant deal, but there is something about the way that the building exists where there's this kind of solid vertical kind of band that separates the kind of the front of the side from the other lot line side. So and somehow that's lost a bit to me.
So you mean where they have the paired openings on the west?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, but especially the paired openings on the top 3 floors, especially there. Okay, and then south, we go to south. Where is south?
That's shown in the mechanical chapter because the staff told us to take that page out. So it's shown in this case you glimpsed it in this
right
page.
There is fine. Yeah. So you can see that in image, it says proposed 160-foot south on Madison Avenue. That image, there are 3 rows of windows. And I think that that's quite a departure from the way that secondary facade reads, which has a kind of a symmetrical, 4 window opening lines. And now we've really kind of exceeded that. So I'm not sure if it could stand just 1 more row. I mean, I recognize that these are residential floors and that they may need more or something, but I just feel it's a bit much.
Commissioner Chapin?
In general, I think the marquee is good. The windows being converted to doors is appropriate. The rooftop is fine. The lot line windows, I'm sort of, I think that most of them, with the fact that they're going over to a different, more original window appearance, and that while it's a lot line, in some cases it's really presenting on a street front that it could be acceptable. I had a little bit of question about, using metal door, the metal doors, because normally it would be wood, but if other commissioners feel that that's they're comfortable with that, I think I could support that as well.
Okay. All right, and I just a clarification on the lot line windows. The rules do allow the staff to approve creation of new lot line windows if there is a pattern in their alignment. And so, and the window is typical of the windows found on the rest of the building. So actually all of the lot line windows, with the exception of those on the west that are the paired ones that are closest to the facade, are eligible for staff level review. So it's really that one line on the west that we would look at. Okay. Commissioner Bland?
I support it all, including those lot line windows that you were just discussing. Yeah, I think it was very elegantly done.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lutfi?
So I also think they've done a really wonderful job, and I'm okay with the lot line windows. The only thing that I would love for them to work with staff on is the paint, just to make sure it doesn't have too much of a metallic look to it. I think it should be more matte.
Okay,
Otherwise, it's very exciting.
okay. Commissioner Jefferson?
It's all well done, and I agree. The lot line windows I'm okay with.
Okay. All right, so I think we have enough to approve it as is, but that we'll ask that they continue to work with the staff on the final selection of the window colors to ensure that it has a matte finish or a non-reflective or metallic looking finish. So Commissioner Gustafson, would you be able to make that motion?
In the matter of LPC 23-04843, 20 East 76th Street in the Upper East Side Historic District, the application is to modify openings, replace an entrance canopy, replace windows and doors, and alter the rooftop addition. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Upper East Side Historic District. I recommend approval. Finding that the modifications of the masonry openings from windows to doors at the building's base will only remove a limited amount of plain masonry and will recall the historic asymmetrical pattern of punched openings. That the proposed multi-light paneled doors will be in keeping with the historic configuration of windows at these openings and will harmonize with the fenestration pattern at the upper floors. That the proposed plaque will be well scaled and typical of signage found at buildings of this type and age in terms of placement and material. That the alterations to the modern marquee will not conceal or detract from significant features at the entrance. That the proposed windows throughout the East 76th Street facade will closely match the historic windows in terms of configuration and profiles, and the change in operation at the lower sash to an in-spring casement will only be perceptible when the sash is open. That the modification of the masonry openings at the upper setback floors of the East 76th Street facade will only remove a limited amount of plain masonry and will align with the fenestration pattern of the surrounding floors and therefore will not call undue attention to themselves. That the setting back of the modern addition at the penthouse will reestablish the central massing of the water tower enclosure and will not remove any significant architectural features. That the raising of select parapets and installation of railings, mechanical screens, a generator, and a flue at the penthouse roof will only be visible from public thoroughfares at a distance and therefore will not call undue attention to themselves, and that the work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the building or the Upper East Side Historic District. And I recommend that the applicant work with staff on the reducing the metallic quality of the proposed finishes of the new door and window infill at the East 76th Street facade.
Thank you. All right, and Commissioner Bland, would you second that?
Second.
Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
With 7 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
Thank you, commissioners. Thank you, Chair Carroll.
Thank you. Okay, we'll now move to public hearing item number 7, LPC 22-00224, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 1393, lot 60, 16 East 79th Street in the Metropolitan Museum Historic District. This is a neo-Georgian style townhouse designed by Warren and Wetmore and built in 1901-03. The application is to establish a master plan governing the future installation of windows.
The applicants have joined the hearing. Staff will be walking you through this presentation, and staff, you may begin.
All right, good afternoon, Commissioners. Michelle Creran, Preservation staff. This application is for work at 16 East 79th Street, which is located on the south side of East 79th Street within the Metropolitan Museum Historic District. The proposal, as Corey mentioned, is to establish a master plan for the future and replacement of windows at the basement level through the 4th floor. The windows at the 4th floor are not included in the master plan. As noted, the house was designed by Warren and Wetmore, and in the photo on the left, you can see it taken a photo taken around 1908, a few years after construction. On the left on this slide is a photo taken around 1911, where it appears that the second floor windows and possibly the first floor windows had been replaced or otherwise altered. And in the right, by the 1940s, there had been further alterations to windows, including the installation of double hung windows at the third and fourth floors. These photos show the existing conditions at the building. This application is before the commission for multiple reasons, including a change from the historic operation and configuration of the windows, as well as for the use of metal clad wood at 3 of the 4 levels. The applicant has included several examples of Neo-Georgian style buildings that originally had multi-light double hung windows as precedent for their proposal, including 36 East 63rd Street, the Harvard Club at 27 West 44th Street, 38 East 63rd Street, 36 East 62nd Street, and the Goodwin Mansion at 11 West 54th Street, which are all either individual landmarks or in historic districts. And here are some photos of the existing conditions at the windows at all of the floors. And here are existing and proposed elevations. The existing ironwork at the basement and first floors will remain. And in this slide and the following slides show the existing and proposed elevations at the windows. And then these slides show the proposed sections. As you can see in this slide, the second floor windows would be all wood, whereas the rest would be a metal clad wood. And lastly, the proposed finish would be an off-white, which is in keeping with what the staff could approve. The applicant is here to provide additional details and to answer your questions.
Hello, my name is Emilia Markowska. Thank you for your attention. I will be presenting today, as Michelle already introduced, the application for master plan for window replacement project at 16 East 79th Street. In addition to what Michelle just said, I would like to emphasize the fact that the historic windows were there for only a few years before they were changed, as we can see on the historic photo from 1911, and then further changes to the facade, including the window configuration change were made in the subsequent years, as we can see from the 1940 photos, including the color of the window. So the existing windows have been there for at least in the current configuration, and color has been there for at least 80 years. So what we are proposing basically is window configuration that is in line with the Neo-Georgian style, we believe, and also we are proposing changing color to match the historic windows. Further improvements, the owner is planning further improvements to the facade, and he's planning to also remove the painted the color on the limestone facade on the first floor and reveal the original limestone. So we are trying to propose a color that would also match the current paint and the limestone facade that would be revealed in future. I have nothing else to add. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Okay, I don't see any questions at this time, so let's move to public testimony, and I will turn it over to Sonia Guar to take us through the testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak, please raise your hand so that she can identify you. Thanks.
Thank you. We do have several signups in advance. Our first speaker will be John Graham from the Victorian Society, and I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Graham for the Victorian Society in New York. The fact that some buildings of similar design were built with 1/1 multi-light sash is irrelevant to this building, which was clearly designed with casement windows at all floors and which still retains casements at the lower 2 floors. A master plan should restore this historic condition. It appears that some of the remaining casements may themselves be historic, and if that's the case, they should be retained and restored. But in any event, a master plan for this house should call for matching the original windows in configuration, operation, materials, detail, and finish. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Nuha Ansari from Friends of the Upper East Side. And I'll be promoting you to panelist now, Nuha. And if you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
My name is Nuha Ansari, and I'm speaking on behalf of Friends of the Upper East Side Historic Districts. Chair Carroll and Honourable Commissioners, Friends Preservation Committee agrees that a master plan to guide the future installation of windows of this elegant Georgian revival townhouse is fitting both because of its historic status and to increase energy efficiency. We are, however, not convinced that the proposed multi-pane double-hung windows would be appropriate in this context. The original Warren and Wetmore design had light-colored casement windows on all floors, noted in the designation report as, quote, originally divided into separate square lights, end quote. Although casement windows are not typical of the Neo-Georgian style, and even though the townhouse had been put through some significant alterations, we believe that the objective of the master plan should be to return the building to its original character and preserve any remaining historic casement windows, rather than transform it even further. In addition, Friends Preservation Committee is concerned that the master plan does not include the windows on the top floor of the building, and we urge the applicants to consider the entirety of the building, as well as the architect's original design intent. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next speaker will be Lucy Levine of the Historic Districts Council, and I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine, and I am speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. In this master plan, the applicant should maintain the visual intent of Warren and Wetmore's window design. They can refer to the 1908-1911 photo for precedent. We believe that double-hung windows may offer a solution more in keeping with Warren and Wetmore's original intent than what is proposed here. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we do not have any other speakers signed up in advance. And I do not see any hands raised. So I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 8 recommends denial. I'll turn it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you. I want to just have the applicants respond. Commissioner Shamir Baran, do you have a question for the applicants or for the staff?
Well, for the applicants, let's say,
Okay.
real quick. And to anyone, actually, I guess I am a little confused. Were the original windows not casement windows? They were not double hung, correct? Maybe I'm not understanding.
They were
casement.
Yeah, they were single light casement. They were replaced early after it was built. And then were replaced again prior to designation. And Michelle, I don't know if you want to just succinctly walk us through the
Sure, I can go back to
various
those
layers.
photos. Yeah. Back. So this is the earliest photo from around 1908, so about 5 years after it was finished, and it looks like we had just single light casements throughout. And then by this 1911 photo, it appears that the first floor and second floor windows had been altered with multi-light casements, or, you know, with the sort of transom or other sash. And then by the 1940s, single light again appears, at least at the second floor, and then double hungs at the upper floors.
Sorry, am I misunderstanding that 1911 looks like it's still casement, even though it might not be single light?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I thought you said that it was already then
No, it was, so the earliest photo shows single light casement windows.
Yep.
And then 3 years later, they have casement windows, but they're multi-light casement windows, I think reflecting the changing tastes of the neighborhood. And then by 1940, the lower floors are returned to single light casement windows and the upper floors are replaced with 1/1 double hung windows. So it's had a variety of window types over the years. And I'll let the applicants respond to any of the other comments we've heard.
What you said it's accurate, and the existing windows matches the configuration and the color of the windows as shown on the 1940 photos for over 80 years. The window configuration and color has not been changed. I have just one comment to the first panelist that had the reservation, I don't know, John Graham, I think he suggested that maybe some of the existing windows that are casement might be original, which is not the case. I just want to clarify that. None of the existing windows are historic.
Okay. All right, commissioners, any final questions? Oh, yes, Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, I'm just curious. You want to just explain why you did not consider returning to the 1908 or probably the 1908 version with all casement windows? Is it for, the
Sure.
Yeah.
So we thought about how to approach this, but the windows on the third and fourth floor are already double hung windows, and given the current usage of space in this building, we believe that double hung windows are better suited as opposed to the historic in-swing casement windows. And also we analyzed some Neo-Georgian style townhouses in the neighborhood building around the same time, and try to match the Neo-Georgian style as shown on the photos included in the presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, any other last questions? Okay, so let's move to our discussion on this. Commissioner Jefferson, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So move.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And just again, this is a building that has currently no historic windows, and we have, as you know, or even earlier today, reviewed an application where all the historic windows were removed prior to designation, and considered whether a change in configuration would be appropriate. And we have, in many cases, approved a change in configuration as long as it is evocative of or relates to the style of a building. I think in this case, this is a historic district where there were many layers of significance and also many layers of change, and that is reflected in the variety of window types that have been here since the earliest days. It's the first replacement prior to 1911. So that's one thing to consider. I think that, the question of the design of the building is another thing one could consider, and that may make it different than like an apartment building, which we saw earlier. And so I think that the applicants have proposed a window that they believe relates to the Neo-Georgian style of the building based on windows found on other similar buildings in the district. they don't in configuration or operation exactly replicate any of the layers at this particular building. So again, a question is, given this particular building, its style, its typology, and the layers in the district, is it, appropriate to have a change in configuration that maybe relates to other buildings, but doesn't necessarily reference original or previous layers on this particular building. So we'll begin that discussion. Commissioner Jefferson, would you like to start this one?
Sure. This one is simple for me. The original intent of the architect is with a beautiful facade with the vertical lines. So I go with going back to the original intent.
Okay. Commissioner Gustafson? Oh, he's gone. Sorry, Commissioner Shamir Baron.
I also think that the most appropriate solution for a master plan here is casement windows all around, but the perhaps lesser appropriate or another option would be to absolutely retain or to have a casement configuration on the tall sort of upper parlor floor, but potentially to do double hung on the other, the third and the fourth floor windows. But absolutely for the main windows that have always been casement to remain casement.
Okay, and the configuration of lights, do you have a particular feeling about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the building next door has multi-lights, but it's still casement. So if they insist on multi-lights, which I think are not necessary here, given the fact that the very original in 1908 and 11 facade did not have multi-lights, I don't think that it's something that's required here. Not terribly inappropriate, but not ideal. Anyway, the building next door has multi-lights, but they are still casement. Here, they're not proposing casement, and I think they should.
Okay, got it. All right, Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I feel like this architect had a real intent. And yes, the building owner changed it in 1911, but it's unusual. It's the architect who's presenting today went to a lot of good examples that are typical of this style of architecture, but the architect wanted to do this. He was trying to say something a little special. And I kind of want to honor that. And I think that, at least the appearance of a casement is appropriate. If they want to do some other kind of window that looks like a casement somehow, which we've done occasionally, I suppose that would be possible. But I don't think we should go to a multi-light because other buildings of the period have that. I think this was a design intent, which was quite interesting, and that some of the memory of that is preserved. So that's what I think should happen. It should, go back in the direction of the original.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Bland?
I'm in agreement that it should be casement. I mean, my eye just looks at these two that we're looking at on the screen right now and says it's so obvious. Certainly for the parlor floor, and like Addie has said, ideally maybe for the other two floors as well, but I think I can accept multi-light double hung up there if that's really what's being wanted.
Okay. And do you have a feeling about the particular configuration of lights within the casements?
No, but they should be multi, I think multi, not exactly what we're seeing here. In other words, harken back to the original.
Okay, or at least the 1911.
Yeah, I guess it was the 1911 that had the multi-lights. Well, I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
I'm not specific about that. But I think what I am specific about is the casement.
Got it. Okay, Commissioner Lutfi?
So I think we're very fortunate to have this photo of what the building looked like originally, and it's very clear that it's casement windows, no, and not multi-light. And when we're doing a master plan, we're basically enshrining what should, when there's window replacement, what's going to happen in the future. So because we're doing that, I think it's very important that we go back to the original configuration.
Okay. All right, so thank you all for your comments. I think we don't have enough votes to take an action today, but I think what we've heard is that that the proposed configuration and operation is not found to be appropriate, and that there is a strong preference to go back to the casement operation and then even further back to the 1908 configuration, although I think there may be some openness to the 1911 or other variations for the configuration, but a casement is, I think, the appropriate window operation. So we won't take an action. We'll ask you to think about the commissioner's comments that you've heard and come back to us with a revised proposal. Okay, and we'll move to the next item.
Next item is public hearing item number 8, LPC 23-04956. This is an application for a binding report in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1850, Lot 1, Morningside Park, scenic landmark. This is a public park designed in 1873 and revised in 1887 by Frederick Law Olmsted, Calvert Fox, Jacob Ray Mold, Julius Munkowitz, and Montgomery A. Kellogg. And the application is to install a concessions kiosk.
Good afternoon. My name is Joy Gutierrez. I am the Parks Revenue and Concessions Architect. Good afternoon, commissioners. I am joined by Tony McCary, the Director of Concession Architecture, and we both are at New York City Parks. We are here today to present a design for a kiosk for an outdoor cafe at Morningside Park. This park's concession was competitively bid through a request for proposal process and is being operated under the terms of a 9-year license agreement between the City of New York and Somerville Enterprises. This contract expires in 2030. Michael Somerville is the concessionaire and is also well known in the Harlem community as Crabman Mike, along with his father. As the licensee, they are responsible for providing this new snack bar kiosk and upgrading the public restrooms to be ADA compliant as a requirement of their contractual obligation to the city. This public-private effort is a priority of parks to create a new amenity for the community and its residents in the neighborhood. Several community groups have long been supportive of creating a concession space in Morningside Park. George Rinaldi Architects are the design architects, and they are represented today by George Rinaldi and Anne Valentino, whom I will turn this over to present the design. Thank you.
I believe we're still waiting on George to join.
Okay.
Okay.
We're here. Please go ahead.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Dr. Ann Valentino, Chief Operating Officer, George Rinaldi Architect. We're proposing a new kiosk concession for Morningside Park, a public park encompassing approximately 30 acres in Manhattan that were originally excluded from the street grid. Can we have the first slide? Because of its challenging topography.
You have control of the presentation. You just need to click on the screen.
Okay.
I'm clicking.
Okay, there we
go.
go. Okay. Next slide. Thank you. Its rocky ledge extends from 110th Street to 123rd Street between Morningside Drive and Manhattan and Morningside Avenues. In 2008, Morningside Park was designated a historic scenic landmark in New York City. Next slide. Features of Morningside Park include a massive buttressed masonry retaining wall, overlook bays, natural outcroppings, and open meadows. But we're not focusing on these features of the park today. Next slide. We are focusing on an active area of the park bounded by the curb line of Manhattan Avenue at the intersection of 112th Street. The proposed site shown in the archive photograph circa 1968 contains a one-story brick and masonry non-historic service building set into the slopey hillside. It is accessible both from street and park, and the service building's roof does double duty as a paved outdoor patio. The area of the park also contains ball fields. This part of the park was developed in the mid-19th century. Playgrounds were inserted at the central and northern meadows in the 1930s to 1950s. And following a Robert Moses era resolution in 1955, Columbia University constructed the two ball fields and service building in 1957. Next slide. In 1978, the New York State Department of Parks commissioned a redevelopment design by Bond, Ryder and Associates and Quinnell Rothschild Associates. Phase one, which launched in 1989, included the renovation of the ball fields and a redesign of the 1957 service building. The archive photo at the top of this slide shows the service building before the 1988 renovation with an enclosed area at the top that was subsequently removed. The sketch at the lower left shows a 1989 proposal for the service building with the upper level removed and replaced by a large awning. And on the lower right is the service building after the renovation with new arches and cast stone detailing, which reference the historic details of the park. Next slide. In 2003, Muscuda Cafe operated a food kiosk for about 1 year at the outdoor patio on the roof of the service building. Next slide. The existing ball fields were renovated again in 2006, and today the proposed project site remains active, hosting continuous community activity, including adult and youth baseball and softball leagues that use the ball fields and the service building restrooms. And with the support of the Friends of Morningside Park, there are year-round farmers market and seasonal activities such as the Fall Family Festival, Harlem Youth Gardeners Program, Morningside Explorers Club, and even the lighting of a 50-foot tall evergreen last month. Next slide. The precedent kiosk to the left is a bike rental facility in Central Park. And on the right is a DOT concession kiosk prototype, which PDC has reviewed and generally approved. These precedents provided us with a useful template from which we developed our proposal for the kiosk in Morningside Park. Next slide. The illustrated map shows the active areas of the park that have been developed since the 1930s, including the location of the proposed concession kiosk in the area indicated by the white arrow at the bottom left. Next slide. This is an aerial view of the baseball fields and the existing service building. The white arrow at the bottom shows the proposed location of the kiosk. And this view also depicts the density of trees and plantings surrounding the service building and the ball fields in spring and summer. I'm going to now turn this presentation over to my colleague, Mr. George Rinaldi.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is George Rinaldi, founding principal of George Rinaldi Architect and lead designer for the project. This slide shows a view looking along Manhattan Avenue, showing a public sidewalk and street on the left, paved roof of the existing service building on the right, and of course, the context of the neighborhood of the adjoining buildings. This is a view of the proposed site for the kiosk from across Manhattan Avenue at the corner of 12th Street. As shown, the proposed kiosk location, indicated by a white arrow, is adjacent to a paved area and primary pedestrian sidewalk, which connects to neighborhood streets. It is easily visible due to the close proximity to the 3 ground-mounted flagpoles. In these ways, the location is ready-made for universal access with an unobstructed, continuous path of travel from the public sidewalk to the kiosk. The photo on the right shows, the photo on the left shows the outdoor rooftop patio of the existing service building. It is a view slightly, you can see the slightly raised portion of the patio, which is most likely a remnant of when the service building was larger. This area is where we propose placing the kiosk. Bottom right photo is a photo of the stairs leading down to the ball fields. This is a photo having moved downstairs approximately halfway across the ball field for a view of the existing service building from inside the park. The red square on the right marks the location for the proposed kiosk and above the garage at the end of the arcade. This is a list of the spaces inside the existing service building. The white arrow indicates the proposed placement of the kiosk over the setback at the end of the arcade. Photo on the left shows the service building garage above where we propose placing the kiosk. On the right is a photo of the service building south elevation with its existing electrical panel box. The proposed site plan shows the location of the concessionaire's kiosk near an existing ramp that supports barrier-free access to the kiosk from a public sidewalk. The other elements, tables, trash receptacle, benches, are temporary furniture proposed to join the existing park benches to provide outdoor seating. On the left is the existing west elevation. On the right is the proposed west elevation with the short side of the kiosk facing the ball fields. On the left is the existing east elevation, and on the right is the proposed east elevation showing the short side of the kiosk facing Manhattan Avenue. On this view, on the left is the existing north elevation. On the right is the proposed north elevation, showing the front face of the kiosk with backlit signage where the light shines backward and not directly at anyone, and lettering that measures 10 inches high.
So nice.
On the left is the existing south elevation. On the right is the proposed south elevation, showing a proposed condenser unit to service the kiosk with channeling through the existing service building. Here are 2 isometric views at the kiosk with the awnings up on the left, which is the front view of the kiosk open for business, and on the right is the rear view of the kiosk. These are 2 isometric views of the kiosk when it is in closed position. On the left is the front of the kiosk showing the awnings in the down position and the smaller panes of glass and the side elevation and door fitted with snap-in security screens to reduce the risk of vandalism. This montage shows the proposed kiosk viewed from the stairs to the park. The kiosk design employs the least disruptive and gentlest treatments. This montage shows the kiosk of the roof of the existing service building as viewed from the ball fields in Morningside Park. Please keep in mind, the photo was taken in the winter, but the site will be green with large trees and plantings in spring and summer. This rendering shows the proposed kiosk open for business as viewed from the top of the stairs. This rendering of the proposed kiosk, this is from the ball field. This is the rendering from the terrace itself, and you can see the cafe tables and chairs and viewed in the sunlight with the trees more fully foliated. This rendering of the proposed kiosk shows the service counter designed for barrier-free access, and of course, the drop-down location at the end for ADA access. The rendering on the left shows the kiosk with its awnings open, and the rendering on the right shows the kiosk awnings closed and the security screen snapped into the smaller panes of glass. This is the materials inventory. The proposed kiosk is cedar green with a clear anti-graffiti finish. The countertops are stainless steel. The sign is backlit, pin-mounted matte white lettering, and other elements are temporary furniture and planter boxes. That concludes our presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Okay, let's see if we have public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual. Oh, wait, we have one question. Commissioner Chapin, please go ahead.
Thank you. A question, the size of the kiosk, it's 21 by 1 on one side, and how wide is it on the other side? Is that correct?
10 feet wide.
Okay. I know that there was a previous kiosk here there in 2003 that wasn't too successful. So obviously size, an adequate size is important. They can use storage down below. Is there storage available on site as well or not?
They're using off-site storage and off-site food preparation.
Okay. And the other question, the green that you show in the rendering, I assume it's just a rendering. The what you show is a hunter green, which a darker green that appears in the rendering, and I assume that's what you're actually using. It's sort of a dark green like the Central Park green.
Exactly. Yes.
Thank you. That's it.
You're welcome.
Okay. Right, great. So if you'd like to testify on this item, please raise your hand, and I'll turn it over to Sonia Gior to take us through the testimony.
Thank you. So we do have some signups in advance. Our first speaker will be John Graham of the Victorian Society, and I'll be promoting you to panelist now. If you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Graham for the Victorian Society in New York. The Victorian Society has no objection to provision of a food service facility in Morningside Park. The park's designers, Olmsted and Vaux, typically had such facilities in their parks in appropriately styled and located buildings in order to enable the public to extend its stay. However, this proposal is problematic in several respects, and we find it to be not appropriate. The Fieldhouse building on which the new concession stand is proposed was built in 1957 by Columbia University and appears to have been altered more than once. This is a building that wouldn't be built today, given our understanding of the character and importance of the historic design of Morningside Park, but the latest alteration in 1988 left us with a building that coexists reasonably well with the historic park. Its simple classical details, symmetrical form, low height, and recess into the slope of the edge of the park make it relatively unobtrusive as viewed from within the park, and it provides a full, open, unobstructed view from its viewing terrace roof. These features would all be adversely affected by the proposal. The new structure would destroy the symmetry of the building from both the park and street sides. It would be highly visible from within the park, calling attention to a feature that should be minimized, and it would block views into the park from various locations on the sidewalk and the terrace. In addition, the sheet metal material proposed has no relationship to the Fieldhouse building or to the rugged and picturesque historic features of the park. Finally, the location leaves awkward slots of space at the south and west edges of the terrace, useless and possibly dangerous. We cannot know all the constraints the designers are working under, but we have two suggestions. The first is to put the concession in the arched openings at the field level. We suspect some of the uses in these spaces could be consolidated or eliminated. This would also provide an opportunity to remove the security gate that defiles the view from the lawn. Removing that eyesore should be the first order of business for any project affecting this building. A second option would be to put the concession at the terrace level, but centered and moved adjacent to the sidewalk, east of the existing terrace, near the existing flagpoles. This would reduce, if not eliminate, its visibility from within the park, retain the field house's symmetry, and preserve most of the views into the park. It would eliminate the awkward spaces at the edge of the terrace. Materials should be reconsidered to be more compatible with the field house and or the historic park structures. A final thought is that whatever the outcome, the Commission's report should be very specific about limitations to signs on and around the kiosk. We note that the recently approved food kiosk at Bogardus Gardens in Tribeca already has about 4 times the area of signage shown in the design drawing. Please see photographs attached to our written testimony illustrating some of these points. Thank you very much, Commissioners.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Lucy Levine of the Historic Districts Council, and I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. We are happy that park goers will have access to concessions, but we feel the proposed kiosk design is too bare bones. We would like to see the concession stand offer more visual interest. We believe that the design of Morningside Park and its Seligman Fountain can offer inspiration for a design with greater movement, whimsy, and monumentality. Thank you.
Thank you. And so we do not have any other speakers signed up, and I'm not seeing any hands raised. So I'll note that we received a letter from Friends of Morningside Park recommending approval, and Manhattan Community Board 9 recommends approval. And I'll turn it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I'd like to turn back to the applicant team and ask if you'd like to respond to the testimony we've heard.
Yes, we would like to respond. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We'd like to thank the Historic District Council and the Victorian Society for their participation in this hearing and for their care and attention to our city's historic resources. Regarding the comments about the kiosk design, we would like to respectfully disagree. The kiosk design includes modest detailing and movement in terms of subtle asymmetry in the arrangement of the windows on the front face. We think the scale, orientation, and materials composing this temporary structure harmonize with the beauty of the park in a way that is respectful of its historic fabric. Please keep in mind a concession kiosk is neither a work of art nor a monument. We feel the kiosk design will function well as a frame for placemaking in this location, and we all hope for this special amenity to be successful in this park. We envision the park's visitors enjoying the concessions and their enjoyment contributing to the vitality and whimsy of the park's new outdoor cafe. And I believe Mr. Rinaldi would like to just make a few more comments.
The new structure responds to the asymmetry of the existing service building. The existing service building is not a symmetrical design. It's quite asymmetrical in its form and function. The arched openings on the field level are used by New York City Parks operation and are not available for the commissary. We've designed the kiosk for a designated site at the service building. The windows are designed to accommodate signage mounted inside the kiosk, and there is no further signage on the kiosk other than the name of the concession. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioners, do we have any final questions? Okay, let's close the hearing and move into our discussion. Commissioner Bland, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And as we've heard, this is for this kiosk at this section of the park, which has historically been used for recreation and has had other and field recreation. It has had other service buildings. The current service building was built in the 50s, 1957, and then altered later, particularly in the 1980s. So it's an altered, non-original structure within the park. And so the proposal is to do the kiosk and integrate it into this structure at this end of the park. And the kiosk, as has been designed, is in the hunter green metal cladding with signage and fenestration, and is small enough to accommodate the use without on-site cooking or storage, and is situated in a way to provide barrier-free access from the street. So with that, we'll start our discussion. Commissioner Chapin, would you like to start this one?
Thank you, Sarah. I wish every success to this, operator, because it's been like, I think 20 years, we said, since the last one, and that didn't succeed. So I think it's an important facility for the park. This kind of small concession can be very nice, and in the aftermath of COVID with outdoor seating could be a nice little amenity for the park. I think what's important is one, it's a temporary structure, as was said. I think we have to always keep that in mind. This is not something that is intended as a permanent structure in the park. Secondly, if you're going to have it be successful, it needs good visibility. So I think it's important that it can be seen from the street as well as from the park. People who suggested putting it down below, where there also might be more security issues at certain times of day. And I think that, in general, it's very simple. I think it'll fit in very suitably to the kind of, concession vocabulary that you see in other larger parks. And I think it's approvable. And as I said, I hope it can be successful.
Thank you. Commissioner Bland.
Well, Diana knows everything about this, of course, because of her history with the park. So I defer a lot to her historical view on what didn't work before, and that this is appropriate now. I must say I have a slight hesitancy on the color, but that's such an unimportant issue right now. I think it's very difficult to paint stuff green when it's surrounded by real natural green, at least for 6 or 8 months of the year. But that's a minor comment. And if this is a Parks Department approved sort of color, then I certainly accept that. But I think even this picture is showing the kind of difficulty of a paint color being really happily ensconced in a natural green environment.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Lutfi?
I'm kind of excited about this. And thank you, Diana, for all of your comments and your expertise. I think it's really nicely done. It fits, kind of nicely into the landscape, and it has to have some visibility. It's sort of nice to me that it's nice that it peeks out a little bit, because it also could be an amenity, for the park goers, but also the community. And it's not too big. It has barrier-free access. it doesn't, if you look at the photo, one of the initial photo, it doesn't get in the way of seeing the landscape around it. And this is a park approved color. So I think this is wonderful and I can support it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
Yes, this is one of those projects that's so difficult. You have an existing base that's symmetrical, then you're placing this room on top of it, and you have the flagpoles. And so symmetry would seem to make sense, but asymmetry makes sense. I can support this.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shamir Baran.
I think that as a temporary structure, it's absolutely fine and appropriate. And I also have questions about the green, and we've seen other green used in the parks. And so if it's approved by the park, it's certainly appropriate, even though it seems a bit bright in these images. I think I might have been more interested in seeing something that kind of grew out of the existing utility building, it sort of connected to it. Even if it was something that was made of material that was less solid, not masonry necessarily. This thing does not seem like it is part of the structure below, but I think, that's okay too, because it seems distinct from it. I might have preferred something that would have been an extension of it as the historic version was. So I think that this is appropriate though, and could approve it.
Okay, all right, great. So I think we have a consensus. So I'll ask Commissioner Chapin if you would read the motion. Just unmute yourself, Diana.
Thank you. I thought I was unmuted. In the matter of a binding report, Borough of Manhattan, LPC 23-04-956, Morningside Park Historic Landmark. A public park designed in 1873 and revised in 1887 by Frederick Law Olmsted, covered both Jacob Ray Old, Julius Mukowitz, and Montgomery A. Kellogg. Application is to install a concessions kiosk. I note that the one-story structure with restrooms was constructed in this section of the park in 1903 to 1904 and demolished in 1952. That by the 1940s, the South Lawn was converted to include active recreation fields, and that the existing field house building was constructed in the 1956 to 1957 period and modified in the 1980s. I recommend issuing a positive report, finding that this section of the park has been altered over time to feature active recreational fields and a field house building. Therefore, the proposed work will be consistent with the evolution of this section of the park and will not alter an intact composition of original features. That the placement of the concession kiosk relates to the grade of the site, thereby facilitating barrier-free access in the least intrusive manner. That the kiosk's simple design and form and green material cladding are typical of accessory structures found within the park and allow it to have a harmonious secondary presence. That the kiosk will be small in size in relation to the securing mature trees, with one of its shorter side facades oriented toward the fields, helping it to be subordinate within views of the surrounding landscape. That the signage will be modest in size and well scaled to the kiosk, with only backlighting of the lettering, and that the proposed work will not reduce the amount of landscaping or mature trees or detract from the special naturalistic and historic character of the Morningside Park scenic landmark.
Thank you. All right. And Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Second it.
All right. Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Baran,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
With 6 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
Okay, so that's approved. Thank you. And we'll issue a binding report for that. So a note about the schedule, we are very behind schedule and the last 2 items are public meeting items. And so we are going to conclude now and we will put the public meeting items onto a future schedule. And I want to thank everyone for their participation today, and thank you, commissioners, for your hard work today.